Here's Wrinkles.
Yep, Wrinkles, that's me.
Doesn't look obvious, does it, that I'm wearing yesterday's makeup? No? Nah, that's fine. It's fine. Before we begin, I just want to say thanks for all the lovely responses I got to the Sengoku Basara video last week. The responses to that video and the mouthwashing video from a few weeks ago tells me that the video essay style of stuff is quite liked. You all are enjoying it, and I tell you what, I certainly enjoy it a lot more than I do pointing at the game industry every week and saying that's a bit shit. But unfortunately, I can't pull out a banger like last week every single week. I'm not Jesus, I'm just Jesus adjacent. So this week we are just going to point at the industry and say that's a bit shit. But we got a good reason to, because Sony, in the wake of Concord's disastrous launch and revocation, well, they're floundering and they're worried, and they wouldn't be floundering and worried if they just listened to me, but the game industry never does, which is why it's in the freefall it's in. I'm not saying I could have saved the industry, I'm not Jesus, just Jesus adjacent, but just listen to me, because everything we talk about today is everything that I said was gonna happen. So let's watch that. Next week we'll, like, try and pull another essay out my arse or something.
It is good that you are good.
I am in awe, really, that despite the utter senselessness of saturating a market with games that require a significant time investment, Sony was planning to launch 10 live service games over the span of a few years. If you ever needed an example of the sheer impulsiveness, the lack of restraint, the embarrassing desperation of gaming's corporate leadership, Sony's infuriatingly ludicrous live service plan is a fine choice among an unforgivably huge number of options. And throughout today's discussion, do keep in mind, because it's a great point, last year Sony had a huge critical and commercial success with Astrobot, and the complete opposite with Concord. In 2022, that's what Sony was up to, making 10 games that had a singular goal, a goal that only one or two of them at best could ever have achieved to a reasonably successful degree. That game in this case being Helldivers 2, by the way. Now, in 2025, we get to marvel once again at the undeniable stupidity of game industry executives as Sony's house of wet crackers slumps pathetically in front of their dumbass faces. Astrobot, big hit. Concord, bit shit.
You're still mad at me?
The live service bubble was going to burst eventually. Wait. Actually, scratch that. Was it even a bloody bubble? It's more like the industry divided by zero and burst a bubble that had never been blown to begin with, isn't it? Years ago, they all looked at that fantasy diagram Ubisoft drew, the one that presented the live service game as a magical money Ouroboros, and then they fantasized so hard about pixies bringing them infinite wealth, they collectively dreamed a bubble into existence and never thought to check inside it to see if there was, anything inside. Dickheads. Yeah, a handful of major success stories amidst an ocean of failures isn't a bubble, darlings. Sony is now among those publishers partaking in the inevitable post-burst scrabble, as seen in the news that it's now cancelling a number of in-development live service games. In fact, since 2023, the company's efforts to exploit the trend have eroded, starting with the cancellation of Naughty Dog's The Last of Us multiplayer game. A twisted metal game developed by Firespite went the same way, as did Insomniac's Spider-Man The Great Web. The PlayStation Studios London not only had its game cancelled, it was closed last year with 900 jobs callously axed. There's your bubble. Some of those games you might not have heard of before. I hadn't heard of some of them. Then again, the industry is now so full of cancelled, failing, or failed live services that I, the noted hack-and-slash girl, hadn't even heard of Dynasty Warriors M until I saw the news that it was shutting down just 15 months after it launched. That's honestly how I've been learning of the existence of so many games lately. I don't find out about them until they're done for, because the news of a service game's closure after mere months of existence is more noteworthy than the fact it ever existed in the first place. Recent news has washed 2 more corpses ashore, with Sony shuttering an unnamed project by Bend, aka the Days Gone people, and a God of War live service that... Of course they were trying to make God of War into a live service. Why wouldn't they? This is an unhealthy fucking business. In case you couldn't tell, the game's business is seriously diseased. It's amazing that this keeps happening in the wake of Anthem, which was such a screw-up it made EA pivot away from a live service Dragon Age like a scalded chimp. Well, I say it's amazing. It should be amazing that nobody in charge at any of these companies saw what happened and considered that maybe there was a lesson to be learned. What's truly amazing is how unamazing it is. It was around 7 years ago, maybe even more, when I first started warning that the live service trend was unsustainable, that the very concept of the product meant you couldn't pump dozens of them out into the market and expect them to succeed. I argued that the business model of the live service made it impossible for most games using it to survive, and I argued that not because I have some clairvoyant insight or the kind of business degrees so-called game industry leaders have, it's because it's just plain obvious. In fact, to make it even plainer how short-sighted and thoughtless the industry is, I have dyscalculia, dyslexia but for numbers. Numbers make my brain lock up, equations might as well be a plate of scrambled eggs for all the sense I can make of them, and yet I'm a mathematical genius compared to Sony's inept executives, because I could see from a mile away that what they wanted to achieve was a numerical impossibility. As I've said for over 7 goddamn years now, live services are designed to monopolise a player's time and ideally their money. If a player's time is monopolised by just a single live service, it cannot be monopolised by another, let alone the dozens more that are all trying to do the same thing. How do executives not know how monopolies work? They have spunky wet dreams about them all the bloody time. There just aren't enough people and not enough time to keep the failure of the service game gold rush from being anything other than inevitable. 10 live service games. Sony wanted to launch 10 products into a market that couldn't have been more obviously unable to support them, with former executive Jim Ryan joyously boasting about how that market was the future of video games. The way he spoke of the live service gold rush in 2022 just oozed naivety, if not outright childlike wonder. That phenomenon of the live service game that has in a very large part fueled the enormous growth in the gaming industry that we've seen over the last 10 years. I think that trend towards live services will continue, and if you look for a model in our category of entertainment which supports sustained engagement over a long period of time, live services games arguably fit that bill better than a subscription service. Yes, subscription models. Funny he brings those up, considering the MMO gold rush of the 2010s went exactly the same way the live service one is going now. This old Jim Ryan quote may have just become one of my new favourite examples of executive dumbassery for what it demonstrates to anybody capable of basic pattern recognition. I was there, way back when. I used to go to E3, foolishly, and it was in that era where every company had multiple MMOs in the works. I nearly fell asleep through all sorts of presentations for upcoming MMOs back then, none of which I remember the name of, none of which are here today. All of them, though, wanted exactly what live services want: to dominate the time and money of a mass audience. Microtransactions are mechanically different to subscriptions, but anybody who thinks that makes live services different enough from MMOs to greenlight 10 of the things has a banana rattling around inside their otherwise vacant head.
Trillions of matey bubbles.
New trend comes along. Publishers notice trend. Publishers throw baby out with bathwater to mass adopt new trend. Trend collapses under weight of mass adoption. New trend comes along. The routine repeats. Insanity is not, as pop culture claims, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If that was the case, however, then every executive in the game industry would be fucking certifiable. The excruciatingly slow, ongoing crash of the live service gravy train is something you'd think I would delight in, considering it's yet another outcome that I accurately predicted while being ignored or shouted down. The Cassandra of video games justified once more. While it is justifying to a large degree, I take no merriment from the mess that publishers have made. The damage they've done is tragic, not funny. Companies sidelined other types of games in favour of one big goose egg, wasting shocking amounts of time and money to develop dead-on-arrival games, and the executives in charge passed the results of the failures they spearheaded onto developers in the form of studio closures and layoffs. And the worst part is, they'll do it again, because it's a pattern. Bear in mind, video game publishers were the ones who got suckered by NFTs, not the customers they tried to subsequently sucker with them. I think it's hilarious that video game companies invested so heavily in NFTs, and they were left holding the bag because we didn't bite. They're marks. Game executives are marks.
Oh, hi, Mark.
And a new trend always comes along for them to mark out for, and they always greet new trends the exact same way with the exact same result, because they're fucking marks.
That is remarkable. You have no idea what you are. You really are that ignorant.
I want to revisit Dynasty Warriors M, if you'll indulge me, because I'm still on my big Muso game fixation at the moment, and because Tecmo Koei's attempt at service shenanigans is a fine example of what I'm talking about. DWM is, as its name might suggest, one of the dozens of mobile games based on existing properties that publishers have absolutely flooded the platform with. After learning about it closing after 15 months, and therefore learning about its existence at all, I naturally downloaded the thing and tried it for myself, and believe me when I say that I truly did not need to have bothered. After all, I've already played Raid Shadow Legends. That really is all Dynasty Warriors M is. A self-evident example of the redundancy of games like Dynasty Warriors M. It's the exact same game I've seen dozens of times before, with the same whirlwind tutorial that deliberately tries to overwhelm you, the same simplistic base building, with arbitrary completion times you can pay to speed up, the same gacha-style character unlocks, the same autoplay feature on battles that you might as well use because the gameplay is the least important part of the goddamn game, etc. And when I say it's the same, I don't mean it's the same kind of thing, I mean it's literally the same. So many of these games coming out and closing down within months are identical to each other. Just Raid Bloody Shadow Bloody Legends with a different set of brand logos. Like, of course Dynasty Warriors M couldn't keep itself going. Why would people who like Raid play it when they're already absorbed in Raid? And why would Dynasty Warriors fans play it when they have, you know, actual Dynasty Warriors games instead? Since almost the beginning of my career, I've criticised the attitude that copying a successful game will copy the game's success, but not only is that attitude continued, it's worsened to the point that it's become 100% literal, and they wonder why they're failing. Companies wonder why these games are failing when they're so immediately obsolete. This utter stupidity is one of the reasons I'm so frustrated by the absurd insistence that Concord failed because DEI, as if a terminally online culture war actually matters outside of the dorks fighting it. Like, sure, it sucks and it's threatening as a queer person to see people violently screaming because they briefly saw someone like you in a video game, but that doesn't offend me. What offends me is how much of a distraction their ongoing tantrum is. A distraction that's actually entirely favourable to the very companies these useful tools are aiming their ire at. It's exactly why Elon Musk, humanity's answer to a cockroach made of semen, is so cringily pretending to be a hardcore gamer right now. These wealthy jizz mushrooms will do anything to take attention away from all the shit that's their fault, and a culture war is just the ticket. I hope one day the mob of outraged tourists shitting themselves over pronouns in video games realise just how much Musk is playing them. 'Cause he Sure as shit ain't playing Path of Exile 2. Game publishers love culture war bullshit because it provides so much free cover to the dogshit-brained, soup-eyed jerk turnips who keep pushing these games out to die and making the developers take the blame for the shit they mandated. How many times now have we had stories of games in development being forced to pivot by impulsive management, leading to tons of scrapped work and wasted resources? I'm still waiting for the sordid details of Concord's development to finally come out, because as someone who studied the industry longer than many gamers have been alive, I could feel the ineptitude of desperate mismanagement seeping through the controller as I played the cursed thing. A recent article, again on Bloomberg, delivered another case of Cassandra syndrome. Remember how much I've been saying in my work that executives are the reason games are too expensive to make, and that their overpaid, underqualified leadership is the biggest drain on development? Yeah, the article exposes a truth I've been yelling into the bugger-damned void long before its publication. Industry management is literally the reason why games are too expensive to make. And that's on top of how expensive the bastards are to pay. Absolute rifles like Jim Ryan possess neither the hindsight to see that they're repeating mistakes nor the foresight to see the predictable results of the mistakes they're making. While the wasted work and resources undoubtedly suck, it's honestly a good thing that Sony cancelled that Ben project and that God of War spin-off. It won't feel that way to those who worked on it, but better the losses be cut now than to keep sinking costs into games that almost certainly had a Babylon's chance in full of succeeding and would almost certainly end in studio closures and layoffs. And how cruel, how sick it is that the executives who mismanage these games into failing are the very ones who decide upon the layoffs in order to keep receiving gigantic financial bonuses. How cruel, how sick it is that sometimes the best thing that could happen to a game these days is for it to be cancelled. The game industry smells of poo, is what I'm saying. I'm tired. I had this massive hardcore match with Helen Charlotte Campbell at Tidal yesterday. I got bashed with a steel chair and punched in the face with a steel chain and had my head bounced off the ring post. Literally, like not pretend times, it bounced into it. It was horrible, and somehow that was less painful than the week before where I got a nosebleed, where for the very first time after 7 years in the business got busted open doing a promo. I had the microphone in my hand, I was thrown over the top rope of the ring, landed on the ring apron, punched myself in the nose with the microphone, splurt all out my face, doing a promo. Only I could pull that off. Anyway, speaking of pulling off, I'm going to go and do my post-video ritual, so I'm going to enjoy that. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week. Thank God for me. I don't really wank after I film these, that would be weird. Do them during.